What if, instead of the orthodox Aurangzeb, his liberal brother Dara Shikoh had ascended the Mughal throne? Would history have taken a different course? Was Aurangzeb truly a fanatic and ruthless ruler, or is this a perception shaped by later narratives? One of the most controversial names in Mughal history, Aurangzeb Alamgir, a ruler who governed the Indian subcontinent for nearly half a century, a king who imprisoned his own father, executed his brother, and made harsh decisions to consolidate his power. But was Aurangzeb really as cruel and religiously intolerant as he is often portrayed? Or has his legacy been unfairly tainted by British historians and modern writers? Today, we will delve into Aurangzeb's life, his decisions, and the contrasting perspectives surrounding his rule. This video will explore whether Aurangzeb was truly a tyrant, or if his strict policies were a product of the circumstances he faced. So, let's turn the pages of history and uncover the real story of Aurangzeb. Among the Mughal emperors, only one figure failed to secure a place in the collective memory of the Indian public: Alamgir Aurangzeb. Among common people, Aurangzeb is perceived as a religious zealot and a staunch fundamentalist who harbored hatred for Hindus. To fulfill his political ambitions, he did not even spare his elder brother Dara Shikoh. Moreover, he imprisoned his aging father for the last 7.5 years of his life in the Agra fort. Recently, a Pakistani playwright, Shahid Nadeem, wrote that the seeds of India's partition were sown the moment Aurangzeb defeated his brother Dara. Even Jawaharlal Nehru, in his 1946 book, The Discovery of India, portrayed Aurangzeb as a fanatic and a reactionary figure. However, American historian Audrey Truschke, in her book Aurangzeb, The Man and the Myth, argues that it is incorrect to claim that Aurangzeb destroyed temples out of hatred for Hindus. Truschke, who teaches South Asian history at Rutgers University in Newark, writes that this perception of Aurangzeb stems from British-era historians who promoted Hindu-Muslim animosity under their divide and rule policy. She also suggests in her book that had Aurangzeb's reign been 20 years shorter, modern historians would have assessed him differently. Aurangzeb ruled over 150 million people for nearly 49 years. During his reign, the Mughal Empire expanded so extensively that for the first time, he brought almost the entire Indian subcontinent under his rule. Truschke writes that Aurangzeb was buried in an unmarked grave in Kuldabad, Maharashtra, whereas in stark contrast, Humayun was entombed in a grand red sandstone mausoleum in Delhi, and Shah Jahan was laid to rest in the magnificent Taj Mahal. According to her, it is a misconception that Aurangzeb destroyed thousands of Hindu temples. At most, only a few dozen temples were demolished under his direct orders. Nothing occurred during his reign that could be classified as a genocide of Hindus. In fact, Aurangzeb appointed many Hindus to important positions in his government. Aurangzeb was born on November 3, 1618, in Dohad during the reign of his grandfather, Jahangir. He was the third son of Shah Jahan. He had 4 sons, all born to his wife, Mumtaz Mahal. Apart from studying Islamic religious texts, Aurangzeb also read Turkish literature and mastered calligraphy. Like other Mughal emperors, he was fluent in Hindi from childhood. From a young age, Shah Jahan's 4 sons were locked in a fierce struggle for the Mughal throne. The Mughals followed the Central Asian tradition where all brothers had an equal claim to political power. Shah Jahan wanted his eldest son, Dara Shikoh, to be his successor, but Aurangzeb believed that he was the most capable heir to the Mughal Empire. Audrey Truschke mentions an incident that took place after Dara Shikoh's wedding. Shah Jahan arranged a combat between 2 elephants, Sudakar and Surat Sundar, a favorite form of Mughal entertainment. Suddenly, Sudakar charged furiously towards Aurangzeb, who was on horseback. Aurangzeb struck Sudakar on the forehead with a spear, enraging the elephant even further. Sudakar pushed Aurangzeb's horse so forcefully that Aurangzeb fell to the ground. Eyewitnesses, including his brother Shuja and Raja Jai Singh, tried to rescue him, but ultimately another elephant, Shyam Sundar, distracted Sudakar and pulled him back into the fight. This incident was recorded in the poetry of Abu Talib Khan, a court poet of Shah Jahan. Another historian, Akil Khan Razi, in his book Waqiat-e-Alamgiri, writes that throughout this entire encounter, Dara Shikoh stood back and made no attempt to save Aurangzeb. The court historians of Shah Jahan also documented this incident, comparing it to a similar event in 1610 when Shah Jahan subdued a ferocious lion in front of his father, Jahangir. Historian Catherine Brown, in her article, Did Aurangzeb Ban Music?, writes about an episode where Aurangzeb visited Burhanpur to meet his aunt, and there he fell in love with Hirabai Zainabadi. Hirabai was a singer and dancer. Aurangzeb saw her plucking a mango from a tree and became infatuated with her. His love for her grew to such an extent that he was even willing to break his vow of never drinking alcohol at her request. However, just as Aurangzeb was about to take a sip, Hirabai stopped him, but their love story ended just a year later with Hirabai's death. She was buried in Aurangabad. One of the biggest questions in Indian history is, what would have happened if the liberal Dara Shikoh had become the sixth Mughal emperor instead of the orthodox Aurangzeb? Audrey Trushke answers this by saying, the reality is that Dara Shikoh lacked the ability to govern or conquer the Mughal Empire. Despite the support of the ailing emperor during the power struggle among the four brothers for the Mughal throne, Dara could not match Aurangzeb's political acumen and strategic sharpness. In 1658, Aurangzeb and his younger brother Murad laid siege to the Agra fort, where their father, Shah Jahan, was residing. They cut off the fort's water supply. Within a few days, Shah Jahan was forced to open the gates and surrender his treasury, weapons, and himself to his two sons. Using his daughter as a mediator, Shah Jahan made one last proposal to divide the empire into 5 parts to be shared among his 4 sons and Aurangzeb's eldest son, Muhammad Sultan. However, Aurangzeb refused this offer. In 1659, Dara Shikoh was captured and sent to Delhi by one of his trusted allies, Malik Jiwan. Aurangzeb humiliated him and his 14-year-old son, Sipihir Shikoh, by parading them through the streets of Delhi in the sweltering September heat, dressed in rags and mounted on an elephant afflicted with a skin disease. Behind them, a soldier followed with a naked sword, ready to behead them if they attempted to escape. Italian historian Niccolo Manucci, who was traveling in India at the time, wrote in his book, Storia do Mogor, on the day of Dara's execution, Aurangzeb asked him, if our roles were reversed, what would you have done? Dara mockingly replied that he would have had Aurangzeb's body cut into 4 pieces and hung at the 4 main gates of Delhi. Aurangzeb had his brother's body buried next to Humayun's tomb. However, in a surprising turn of events, Aurangzeb later arranged the marriage of his daughter, Zeb-un-Nisa, to Dara Shikoh's son, Sipihir Shikoh. Aurangzeb imprisoned his father, Shah Jahan, in Agra fort for the last 7.5 years of his life, where he was often accompanied by his eldest daughter, Jahanara. This imprisonment cost Aurangzeb dearly when the Sharif of Mecca refused to recognize him as the legitimate ruler of India and rejected the gifts sent by him for several years. In 1679, Aurangzeb left Delhi for southern India and never returned to northern India until his death. A massive caravan of thousands accompanied him, including all his sons except Prince Akbar, as well as his entire harem. In his absence, Delhi began to resemble a ghost town, and so much dust accumulated in the rooms of the Red Fort that foreign guests were no longer shown around. In his book, Rukat al-Lamgi, Aurangzeb wrote that the thing he missed the most in the south was mangoes. This book was later translated by Jamshed Bilamoria. From Babur onwards, all Mughal emperors were fond of mangoes. Trushke writes that Aurangzeb would often request his courtiers to send him mangoes from northern India. He even gave some mangoes Hindi names like Suharas and Rasnavilas. In 1700, in a letter to his son, Prince Azam, Aurangzeb reminded him of his childhood when he once imitated the sound of war drums and addressed Aurangzeb with a Hindi phrase, Babaji Doon, Doon. In his final days, Aurangzeb lived with Udaipuri, the mother of his youngest son, Kam Baksh. She was a singer. From his deathbed, Aurangzeb wrote to Kam Baksh, mentioning that Udaipuri was by his side during his illness and would be with him in death as well. Just a few months after Aurangzeb's death, Udaipuri also passed away in the summer of 1707. Aurangzeb, a name forever surrounded by controversy in history. Some see him as a religious fanatic and ruthless ruler, while others view him as a skilled administrator and strategist. His reign was one of the longest and most decisive periods in Indian history, bringing the Mughal Empire to its peak, but also setting it on a path toward decline. So, who was Aurangzeb? a merciless tyrant or a strict ruler shaped by circumstances. His story is not just about a battle for power, but also about how history is interpreted. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed our content, don't forget to subscribe to Chronicle and hit the bell icon so you never miss our upcoming historical explorations. See you in the next video with another fascinating story from history.